Hey guys, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we feature another game from the European Individual Championship played in Romania from the 5th round. I think you're going to enjoy this game. It's a very nice miniature played by, with the white pieces, Alexandros Papasimakopoulos from Greece. I hope I've pronounced that rightly. We'll just call him Alexandros for this game. A strong FIDE master, rated nearly 2400. So one of these younger guys, around 30 years old, looking for his IM title. And with the black pieces, another very young, I'd say kid. I think a recent European or world champion, under 18, Jan Klimkowski from Poland, rated 2511. He's an IM and most certainly will become a Grandmaster very soon, if not already. Although on the last FIDE ratings list I just checked, he was still an IM. So what are you going to see in this miniature game? We're going to see Dutch defense, Leningrad variation, a very risky defense but interesting to play for a win with black. We're going to see some tactical melees in the middle game, and we'll eventually see one of the two players coming out on the top with some very nice tactics. So if you enjoy a nice tactical scrum, this is your game. Okay, so knight f3 was white's first move, and Jan Klimkowski played f5. Now, this is a Dutch defense, but black doesn't yet show his cards. He could go for the Leningrad with g6. He could go for the stonewall with e6 and d5. But stonewalls are not very good against the knight f3 c4 move order. So if you are a stonewall player, I wouldn't suggest playing it against this line, because white does have some very interesting opening ideas based on playing d3 and e4 in these positions, because white still hasn't committed to d4. However, if at some point white does play d4, then you can go for your typical stonewall or classical Llada lines. Klimkowski knows that, and therefore he goes for the Leningrad line with d6 and g6. Now he's trying to play e5, so Alexandros plays correctly d4, and now he goes g6. Now the most normal way of playing here would be g3, the classical way, castle, castle, and this would be the tabaya of the Leningrad, and here black can choose between knight to c6, that's one move. c6 is another very popular move. And finally, queen e8, another very popular move. All of them trying to get in e5 at some point. This is the classical way of playing the Leningrad. However, Alexandros goes for a new idea, or a relatively new idea. He goes b4, which I find to be too risky, but the computer gives it as one of the main lines. So probably Alexandros saw that his computer was giving b4 as a main line and went for it. But I personally don't find it so attractive. I mean, it doesn't make much sense to me. It doesn't develop the king side, doesn't develop any pieces. I think the idea is to put the queen on b3, bishop on b2, e3, bishop d3, but it still doesn't really make much sense. So I don't think it's very dangerous. Klimkowski plays bishop g7, queen to b3, and now a very interesting idea, a5. Not at all forced, but if you want to play a5, now is the time, because white can't hold on to the pawn structure with pawn a3, because you take and the rook is dropping on a8, on a1. So typically against a5, if white can't play a3, he has to push with b5. And now what you've achieved is some point to be able to play a4 if possible. And you've sort of paralyzed the initiative these pawns could get to do in some circumstances. So it's not a brilliant move, but it's interesting to stick in a5, b5 in some situations. Now, of course, castle would be normal, but Klimkowski plays knight e4, a very aggressive move. Now he's hitting on the knight on c3. He's trying to make things happen on this diagonal. And of course, if knight takes knight, he recaptures with the pawn, and the d4 pawn would be lost. So I would say already black is trying to take over the initiative. Bishop to b2, protecting and developing. And now knight to d7. Now, one of the good things about having played a5 is that the b4 pawn no longer protects the c5 square. So if and when black gets in e5, in some certain situations, if white closes or changes, black gets the c5 square for the knight, which is obviously very, very good. Also hitting the queen. So for example, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, knight takes knight, pawn takes knight. You might think that white is doing well because of the double pawns, but when the knight lands on c5, hitting the queen, it protects the e4 pawn and also can at some point head for d3. And this is because black played a5 before. So when you're looking against at a certain level, let's say 2400 upwards, even 2300 upwards, most of the moves, even though you don't understand them, do have some positional nuances. Sometimes they appear on the board, sometimes they don't. For example, in this game, this nuance didn't appear on the board, but it could have. Now, Alexandros plays very ambitiously here with knight takes e4. Pawn takes e4 and knight to d2. And basically he's trying to claim that the pawn on e4 could end up being weak. But Klimkowski has other ideas. First, he plays queen to e7, a very nice move, with the idea being that after he's actually threatening pawn takes pawn and maybe e3 afterwards. And of course, the main idea is that knight takes e4. Now he plays e takes d4, hitting the knight. So now we're getting into the tactical parts of the game. You can see already that this game could end up very violently because a lot of things are happening here. First of all, the knight is being attacked, and if the knight moves away, black can play pawn takes pawn in some situations. So Alexandros had probably already decided here that against pawn takes pawn, he wasn't going to move his knight, and he plays bishop to d3. Now this is very Morphy type play. Develop and attack. Pawn takes pawn, and now castle. Now this is actually very, very interesting because Klimkowski does have his king in the center. And I'm certain that both players here were understanding that this position anything could happen in this position. Because if white gets the rook to e1, this can be very dangerous. Now, for example, if black continues capturing pawns, I, for one, would not like to play this position with black. I mean, there's just too many dangerous things going on. I don't have development. This is a risky position to play. And of course, Klimkowski understands this and decides to go for knight to e5. Very good move, blocking the diagonal, hitting the bishop on d3, and more importantly, allowing at some point a development to get his king maybe to castle on the queen side. And here the computer suggests that the best move is rook a to e1, which actually seems quite logical, but wasn't played. Now, of course, the problem with this move, you have to start calculating things like knight takes d3, and if you recapture with the queen, then the bishop is hanging, but rook takes e3 could possibly happen, then we can block. I mean, there's all sorts of variations here to calculate. Also, knight takes d3, you still have to calculate the consequences of bishop to g7. Now, can I capture here? Can I capture here? What's happening? A lot of calculations to be made. But in any case, Alexandros should have tried rook a e1. He played f3, which I just don't like. He's sort of closing the position, making sure his knight is well protected on e4, and hoping for rook a e1 and rook takes e3. But it's slow, and it allows Klimkowski to get the upper hand. Bishop to f5, well played. Rook a e1. And now a4, basically with the idea of diverting this queen from the protection of these two pieces, trying to get some tactics in. Queen a3 is only move. And now the computer suggests that the best move would have been knight takes d3. Now if queen takes d3, the bishop on b2 is hanging with not enough compensation. So black would have played bishop to g7. And now the best move is knight takes e1. Bishop takes h8. Knight takes g2. King takes g2. Otherwise e2 is winning. And now bishop takes e4. Pawn takes e4 and long castle. And the computer analyzed this position as a winning for black because there's a threat on the bishop and also queen takes e4 is threatened. But of course here black is actually a piece down. So from this position to be able to calculate to this position and clearly see that you're winning is not at all easy. Computer is able to do it, but for humans, not only processing the calculations and the multiple lines, but also assessing that in this position, you're not losing because you're a piece down. It's very tricky. So it's understandable that Klimkowski might not find the best move here, and he doesn't. He plays bishop to e4, and now Alexandros makes the decisive mistake. He should have played bishop takes e5, bishop takes e5, and bishop takes e4. And here, just look at the position. Probably this would end in a draw. Both players have 7 against 6 pawns, but the e3 pawn would probably fall at the end. b7 is attacked, opposite colored bishops. Okay, I still think black maybe has a slight edge because he has the extra pawn and some attacking chances, but with correct play, this should be a draw. But instead of that, Alexandros played f takes e4, probably still playing for a win, and now Klimkowski calculates correctly the previous variation. He goes knight takes, and knight takes. And here it's still difficult to calculate, but the position is one step further on, and the pawns are already blocked there. So maybe it was easier for Jan to calculate this, or he calculated it in the previous move. It wasn't clear for him, but here he went for it. Now, of course, if king takes, then we go for the previous variation. Long castle. The bishop must escape. Capture on e4. And when he blocks, e2 is winning. There's no way to stop the pawn. So therefore, Papasimakopoulos played queen to b2, protecting the bishop, and just trying to pick up the knight, and also protecting against e2. A bit slow, and we get the knight out with tempi. A very strong move, this knight f4. Threatening e2, threatening queen to g5 and queen to g2, and, well, it doesn't threaten queen to g2 because the queen is protected, but all sorts of mates. And if rook takes, queen to g5 picks up the rook in the game. Only move for Klimkowski, queen to f6, a last try to exchange queens, but now black crashes in e2, and of course rook e1 was played, but if queen takes queen, king takes queen, the rook is attacked and also the bishop is attacked. So e2, only move rook to e1, queen takes e4 threatens mate, only move queen to g5, allowing knight to h3, checkmate. So I thought this was quite a nice game to bring to you guys from the Romania individual, two of the younger generation, and at least for me, when I see these games, I still hope and I understand that chess has still a long way to go as a game for, let's say, under 2600s. Maybe in the elite, they know so many openings, it's a bit difficult, but for amateur players like ourselves, but even at a level of 2500, as you can see, a lot of things are going on and fun games can still be produced. Guys, I know I have been a bit lacking on the updating schedule. I used to update every day or every 2 days. Now I'm going to the 3-4 days lapse. I am really up to my neck in different work things that I have to do. I'm also traveling next week to India, as I mentioned before. But what I'm going to do is try to keep you updated with some videos every 2 or 3 days while I'm away. And this time, hopefully, I'm going to try and bring you some cool videos from India. Maybe an analyzed game, maybe the promised endgame corner, maybe just some interviews with any of the players. And I'll also provide you with the links to the interviews I'm publishing on the FIDE website. So stay tuned. And I again hope you all enjoyed this game. You found something to learn. You found some enjoyment, or maybe even some entertainment. And I hope you'll continue watching and learning and enjoying from my videos. And don't forget to subscribe. We're already around 900 and only 100 left to get to 1,000. Take care. Have fun.